thank you for the time gathered to participate in this, as each of us considers the paths that we may take for the future. I pray that this time will be productive and that all here will leave with something that will help them. I pray that all that we say and do will be honoring and glorifying to you. We'll give you the praise and the glory for everything that's said and done. In your name I pray. Amen. This is Pre-Law Society. Tonight we're having a panel for the pre-law internship. We have 4 here. But first, let's introduce the Pre-Law Society itself. I'm Ryan, I'm the president, and I'm a junior political science major in the pre-law program. As president, I make it a priority to assist any of you in any way that I can. You all have a reason I'm up here. I was voted in by you all, and I appreciate the vote of confidence. Our vice president, who is on the panel, Jared Phillips, would you stand? He's a senior in the pre-law program. You can see him in his security uniform around campus, taking good care of us. Bree, would you stand? Bree is our clerk. She plans to attend Regent University Law School this coming year, and she seeks to start a career with the American Center for Law and Justice. Bree runs our social media, and she is looking forward to connecting with the new students in the pre-law program and helping them in any capacity that she can. And then the gentleman running the camera back there is our faculty sponsor, Dr. John Reese, everybody's favorite history teacher. Dr. Reese has served faithfully in the PCC Humanities Department. Since 1985, he has educated the likes of my own high school principal, the PCC president, Dr. Troy Shoemaker, and even a congresswoman. He lives a double life as a teacher and a farmer, and he is the only individual I know of who has a PhD and doesn't drink coffee. Imagine that. A little bit about this organization, Pre-Law Society. We rest on 2 pillars, really. The first one is getting to you information about law school and legal careers. That's what we all are seeking. And then our second one is our mentorship program, which, let's talk about that right now. Bree, do you have those? Would you stand and pass one around to everybody? What she's passing out is a sign-up sheet. You can become either a mentor or a mentee. If you're a freshman or a sophomore, and you're looking for somebody to be a helping hand to you in establishing yourself in the PCC community, this is something that you would definitely be interested in signing up as a mentee. If you're an upperclassman and you've been here a little while, junior, senior, and you know a thing or two about the difficulties of the college life, you can pass on that information to underclassmen and help them. This can include study tips, information about classes, activities, and the like. Our desire is to do whatever we can to prepare you for what is coming and make sure you know how to succeed. To sign up for the mentorship program, we have those registration sheets ready, coming around to you right now, and we would strongly encourage our juniors and seniors, again, in attendance, to consider being a mentor, and then the younger ones being a mentee. This panel up here is composed of 4 who each held an internship in a legal setting over the summer. And this is actually a 4-credit class. You get 3 credits out of this. You can take this over the summer or during intern. It's the HI 351 pre-law internship. The prerequisite is only business law. You have to be a sophomore to take business law. So if you're early on in your college life, make that something that you would definitely consider to be good on a law school application. Internship of 120 hours provides an opportunity for the student to gain practical knowledge about a career in law or with an organization or firm that works directly with legal issues. Our interns tonight, from closer to me to that way, our first one's Brianna Stout, then Jared Phillips, I mentioned who's our vice president, Leo Palmieri, and Benjamin Bostwick. The topic that I've asked each of them to speak on is some things that they've learned on the job, what a day in the job looked like for them, some of the interactions that they had with the attorney that they worked for, and the like. So at this time, we will give it over to them. Brianna, would you like to start? Yes. Just talk for as long as you can.
beneficial as I continue my law career, being able to understand what goes into their side of the job. The biggest thing I learned from my internship was that no matter what you deal with, sometimes people don't react well. And it is your job to control how you react to people. And because a law officer, a lawyer, you have to react better than everybody else. If someone else is overreacting, you need to stay calm so you can keep them calm. A day, like in the internship, I did a lot of different things. The biggest portion of my internship was sitting in on dispatch and doing ride-alongs. In dispatch, I got to sit in and listen to the different calls that were made, and as a dispatcher's job to send out police officers or ambulances. I learned through dispatch that you have to be very calm, and you have to be good at multitasking. You might get a call from someone who's really anxious, they're scared, they don't know what to do, and as a dispatcher, your job is to keep them calm and find out the necessary information so you can send them help. With the ride-alongs, I rode along with different police officers. I did day and night shifts. Mostly I rode along with traffic stops. But even with traffic stops, people sometimes get a little upset. They don't like that you're stopping them. They get upset with you. But the biggest thing I learned through that was that you just have to be kind. You have to be firm, but you can't let them rattle you. You have to be professional.
Jared?
I did mine with actually the state's attorney's office, where I'm from back home in Bead, South Dakota, and so it's not a large area, it's kind of small, in a small town. Live right in town with the courthouse, so it was fairly easy to get my internship. Just call up they never published that they did them, but if you called up to the office and asked for one, they would grant it. So that's basically what I did. Just call up, talk to them, and said, hey, kind of interested in doing an internship this summer. He's like, okay, yeah. Sent him my resume. He said, okay, you're in. So didn't really have much communication before I got there, but so I showed up, 9 a.m. the first day, and they're like, oh yeah, they're over at the courthouse doing a jury trial. Well, that was during COVID, so actually they weren't in the courthouse because the courthouse can't do social distancing there. And so they were actually, the courthouse is in what is Deadwood, South Dakota. So you got your Atlantic City, Las Vegas, and you got Deadwood. And so court was actually being held in the upper floor of a casino. I was like, well, it's the first time I've ever been in a casino. And so that was kind of hazy. But yeah, so we got up there and they had the whole thing spread out, and they were actually starting one year, which is your jury selection process. And so I got to see it from beginning to end, and it was quite the experience. So immediately got connected with the attorney and all that. There were a number of different people in the office I got to work with. The leader was, of course, Mr. Fitzgerald, state's attorney, and your district attorney, state's attorney, basically he's the state prosecutor in that district. And then, of course, he had a bunch of his secretaries and undermen, and then some of the deputy state's attorneys as well. I got to talk and deal with them, and so a whole bunch of different people involved in the office. The jury trial was the first thing that started out. That took a couple days, get started. It was over a sexual assault case of a minor, so quite a graphic case and lots of things. Like first day, I started hearing and seeing things that the normal people don't usually hear and see. It was quite enlightening. To once you get in the legal office, you see the darker side of things. Like for the first entire month, all I dealt with was sexual assault cases. That's I got to watch all the. They're basically they call them interviews, forensic interviews. So once the kids mention something, then they're taken to a place, and people kind of talk about with them. And so I had to go through and watch all those and take notes and all that. So it was quite like, oh my, our society isn't usually what we think it is. So that was one of the things that really struck me is how calm everything seems on the surface, but deep underground, it's kind of different. And so that was the first week got to watch the entire trial about that. Everything after that didn't really have too much more trials or anything like that. Mostly a lot of hearings that we went to for circuit courts, all different kinds of cases. A lot of drug cases or traffic stops and things like that. Just hearings, different things. Every Monday I got to be in with deputy on magistrate court, so I actually got to sit up at the bench with the attorney as he's going back and forth with the judge and the defense attorney. And people come in after their first arrest, and then they're read all their rights, and they read this and read the charge, and they have to go through all that. And so we're taking notes and having mark this, and next hearing is this, and fine is this. So I just did a lot of recording and things like that, taking notes and all that. And I got a lot of notes, a lot of notes. And so every Monday, that's what I did. And then circuit court usually Tuesdays, Thursdays, and things like that. Other than the one cases I talked about, I got to do a couple other different legal topics. So basically, it's a lot of cases coming up that you're looking at. And so Mr. Fitzgerald, he'd call me over and say, hey, or read through these documents or watch this video here, and then I want you to look out some specific things. Kind of look for this here, look for this here, look for this here. So I had to take that notes on specific things. And that took a lot of time, because you're not only just reading through something, you have to find certain details that have bearing on a case. Like, if I personally were going to stand before a judge and say why this guy should go to jail, I need to be able to prove it from this document. And so I had to do some pretty detailed work on some of that. And reading reports. And then the stressful part is once I finish, reading and writing all that down, then he'd call me to the office and he's like, okay, now what do you think? And he'd ask me my opinion on what I thought of the matter. So I thought that was pretty cool. It was nice. And it was a little stressful though when he did that. But he was always, like, yeah, I think it should be this way. And he was a very good guy to work for. Really liked him. Very, very reasonable. Very, very cut and dry. So there is no innocent person in the world. If you were in his office, he had all the stuff, and yeah, you're guilty. And he knew why, and he could prove it. And he was totally opposite from the defense attorneys. Pray for our defense attorneys. They're in big trouble. Yeah. The one that we had, I won't say names, but he was a nutcase, basically. He had no business doing what he was doing. And so watching him up there for that one sexual assault case, his defense was it's just government oppression, people. So he didn't really have much of a defense at all. He was just claiming government overreach, and went on this big long thing. The judge had to tell him to be quiet a couple times. So it was quite interesting. And there was a couple other times the judge really came down hard on him because of some of the things he was going and saying and doing. So yeah, don't go after people like that. Don't be a jerk. So that was kind of interesting to see the different nature between the one attorney who knew what he was doing and he could actually take the law and apply it, and the other guy who really had no idea what he was doing. But so it doesn't really take much to be a lawyer. Get anybody up there. And so I did that actually. I did much more than just the regular internship. I did for an entire summer, about 8-hour days for an entire summer. So spent a lot of time. Got to learn some specific actual legal things, like your res judicata and your double jeopardy and competency to stand trial and a whole bunch of other cool things that you hear about and learn about in classes here. Well, I actually got to dive into the law books and have to detail out, okay, should this or should this happen based on this legal doctrine? And so I had to write some things about that. So yeah, a lot of reading, writing, and doing reports. So I enjoyed it. It was very fun, and I would recommend anybody to get involved in something like that.
Very good. Jared, Brianna, thank you. Moving on to Leo.
So my internship, I'm from South Carolina, and I live in a small town, and so the internship I did was with a local attorney. And I got the internship because the attorney is a friend of a friend, so I was able to contact him, and I had a short interview, and he was like, okay, we can do this. He's a Christian, so we shared values, and he was interested in teaching me about what a lawyer does on a daily basis and about legal processes. So I worked for him for most of the summer, and the two biggest things I took away from it were how much research an attorney has to do and dealing with people. He had me do a lot of research. He gave me access to websites that most people don't have access to, that only attorneys have access to. So I was able to read different cases that in our state and different legal codes and stuff that an attorney has to know. He had me do some research for him and find out specifics of the law that he could use and apply it to things he was dealing with. I also sat in on a hearing specifically about a restoration of Second Amendment rights. Very interesting. And it was interesting because I'd never sat in on a hearing before, so it was interesting to see the process that went on. It was a private hearing, so there was no audience there. But and then so he had me do a lot of research and dealing with people because he had this one client that was really hard to deal with. Didn't want to talk to him. Didn't want to have anything to do with what the law required. So he had a tough time getting that guy to cooperate. And it was interesting to see how he dealt with that. It was very professional in the way he dealt with that, very Christ-like in the way he dealt with it. And it was a good inspiration for me just to see how to deal with people, because I'm not usually a people person, but I'm working on that, and being around this attorney helped me with that. I also sat in a lot of business meetings discussing different cases they were working on. He deals with a lot of estate cases, so dealing with land and partition of land, if you know what that is, and it was a very positive experience because I got to see, because in the town where I live, everyone knows each other. It's a local town, so pretty much everyone knows him. He knows pretty much everyone. So it was interesting to see what a local attorney in a small town deals with on a daily basis, and how they go through dealing with people, because they know everyone, and when you know everyone, things can get tense sometimes. And him being a Christian also helped because we shared a lot of values. We would have interesting conversations about current events and his opinion on the law and how things could change. He talked about probate lawyers a lot, probate judges a lot, and how they often show a lot of favoritism towards certain lawyers, unfair favoritism, and oftentimes they won't, make a judgment in favor of a lawyer they don't like, not because their argument isn't good, but because they just don't like that lawyer. So it was interesting hearing that from him, and how he told me this, which was very enlightening, that when you become a lawyer, you really see how original sin applies to life, because the legal field is full of it. You can see original sin and how and just the interactions with people and the interactions with the law, and how people they don't have good intentions most of the time. So yeah, I think the experience taught me a lot about how a local lawyer deals with stuff, and how a local lawyer, especially civil law and estate law. He also had me deliver some papers to a courthouse one time in the rain, so I was driving in the rain, and that was an interesting experience. And I learned quite a lot, and it helped me understand more about what I'm getting into. So I highly recommend getting an internship, and obviously, each of us have had very different experiences in this, but mine was a positive experience, and I learned a lot.
Thank you, Leo. That's very interesting. Ben, your turn.
Well, I'll parrot what Leo says. I mean, we've all had very, very different internships. My internship was with 3 different judges here in the Pensacola area. This is where I grew up. I've got a lot of friends here. Florida First Judicial Circuit has basically been where I've the jurisdiction I've been under, and thankfully it's the one where I was able to serve. How I got it was, well, it's been in the works for a long time. Last summer, leading up to last summer, I was trying to find a judge that I could shadow, just sit with and watch, but I wasn't really getting many results. I did have a very good friend. His name's Dr. Rick Fountain. He works over at the University of West Florida. He grew up here, probably in his 70s, 80s. My personal pre-law mentor. He was trying to get me connected with other judges, and it worked, but there was an email fluke, and their email didn't make it to my inbox, and I didn't find it until a couple months after the deadline passed. So I couldn't get it the summer before. I was pretty disappointed. But this summer, we tried it again. Sent it to the same judge, and she had the idea this year to get me connected with a couple of other judges. So I ended up shadowing those 3 judges, 2 here in Escambia County, and 1 just half an hour away in Santa Rosa. One of the pretty cool stories I have from it, just the other week, I was doing a journalism report for journalism class, going through the local paper, and I found an article that said there was a man who owned a gun shop who got arrested for 129 charges of gun fraud. I mean, that's kind of striking in and of itself. Then I realized I had been sitting next to the judge when she signed that warrant. I had read through the warrant report. That was just really cool to see. A lot of prayer went into the job, and thankfully, thanks to the Lord, I was able to get in. But a day in the office looked completely different in each of the different courthouses. My 3 judges were Judge Friedrich, who worked in juvenile law, Judge Gary Burgosh, who worked in family law, and Judge Clinton Drake, who does civil and criminal law over in Santa Rosa. Judge Friedrich doesn't even work in the Escambia courthouse. There's actually a separate courthouse for the juvenile court, and that also includes the juvenile jail, so they don't have to take them too far, and so they're not in an actual prison or anything like that. Day in the office there basically looked like, well, she did a lot of paperwork. So she would sit in her office, reading through a lot of cases, evaluating a lot of things, approving things, and in the meantime, I would sit over in the reading room and study for my LSAT. So I would come out and watch court every now and then, but I also got to see a couple adoptions over there. That was pretty cool. Kids were just so happy to be in their new families. Parents were happy too. So was the judge. It's kind of interesting to see a judge that's allowed to be happy in a way. But I also, at Judge Burgosh's court, things were different. He actually doesn't use his office. He uses his meeting room to put all his computers in because there's more space there. So every day I would go to the judge's office and sit in the judge's chair, power up the judge's computer, and open up a security camera somewhere in the courtroom to watch different court proceedings. If I wanted to go down there, I could just walk down a couple flights of stairs and be in the courtroom. There was a pretty high-profile cold case for a murder that occurred in 2001 that I got to sit through the entire process of. And unfortunately, it ended in a hung jury. They'll have a new trial on the 26th. But watching the attorney's work was incredible. And then when I went back to the office, I realized the camera was still on, and so was the judge's mic. And the attorneys were standing right there talking back and forth with the judge like they were all old friends. Like, enemies at work and friends when they're off the clock. It was interesting to see that aspect. But working with Judge Drake was also a little bit different because their courthouse is 100 years old. They didn't have to think about things like secure corridors or passcode locks. They literally have a key to get in the building. And so the corridors basically have to be patrolled by bailiffs. The judge has to have their bailiff with them, walking with them, because the juries, the witnesses, and the defendants all use the exact. I didn't get jumped, but for walking right next to the judge. But there were a couple times that I was told that it was pretty close. But Judge Drake was a Christian, a very strong Christian, and it's almost like I knew that before he told me. It's the way he conducted himself, the way everybody talked about him. Like, I never met somebody attorney or judge, who thought that Judge Drake did a bad job. And the guy is a genius, but he's a very humble genius. And a role model, definitely a role model. So Judge Friedrich taught me what tough love looks like. A lot of the kids who came into the juvenile court system are already pretty hardened. They don't really want to be there, but they need to be there. Something needs to happen in their lives. Or parents who have who can't take care of their kids properly, who lose custody. She shows tough love in all of those situations, making sure that things are able to be done to help the kids, help the parents, but in the end, being the judge. So I thought she had a very good balance there. From Judge Burgosh, I learned confidence and ownership. He is a former Marine, and he totally owns up to it. He was always talking about how he was the little dog that got in the back door, and all these people who were their big PhDs and whatnot becoming judges, and he's the Marine who just forced his way in. He's kind of fighting against the systems. It's a lot of how he thought of it. But he was very confident in the decisions that he made. The way that he did injunctions, when people would come and try to get injunctions against one another to keep them from interacting with each other for a certain length of time because of domestic abuse or something like that, everything was run very efficiently. Judge Burgosh would read the report, ask a few questions, and then say, okay, here's my decision. And then next, he probably went through 3 times as many injunctions per day as the Santa Rosa people did, because he was very confident in what his decisions were. Judge Drake taught me balance and really self-control. I spent most of my time with Judge Drake, because as time went on, I figured out I didn't really like the juvenile law or the family law quite as much. But Judge Drake was in criminal and civil. He also did injunctions, but he ran them a different way. It's completely legal, judges are allowed to do that. But he would let the parties talk for a long time on whatever they needed to put on record, whatever they needed to say. That way, they had their day in court, they got everything out there, and they were able to go home feeling heard. Judge Burgosh did it in a different way. He also aimed to make sure that they felt heard. But I liked more of the silent compassion, in a way, that Judge Drake had. You could tell that he wasn't out there to move the docket or to get you out of his courtroom. He was there to listen and there to render a decision. He also had a fish tank in his office, which is something I never would have thought a judge would have, but apparently he's had it for quite some time. The last and most important thing I learned was where the Keurigs and the bathrooms were in all of the courthouses. So, unlike Dr. Reese, these judges all drink coffee. So basically what all the judges told me is, what I'm going to get out of the internship is learn what I'm going to like. And they said, you can't actually do much shadowing a judge to help the judge. We haven't been through law school. We don't really know what we're doing. But we can learn what we like. And I watched a lot of different trials, found out that unlike Jared, I actually do like defense law. And I saw some admirable defense attorneys. So they are out there, just apparently not in South Dakota. So I also got to see Judge Drake operate as Christian in a judicial position. So that was interesting, because I asked him how his basically what his career path was. He told me that he ended up going to Georgetown, practicing as a prosecutor for 10 years. Then he got married after a 10-year career, and he'd been a judge for 1 year. So he still hadn't learned all the ropes yet. And the funny thing was, he was fine with it. He was fine with calling other judges to ask them what should happen, or just looking into law for hours on end. There were some times I came into a case knowing as much about the law as the judge did, but he would always read up on it. He was willing to learn and eager to learn correctly. I think that's probably the most important thing that I took away from him. In closing, when I left the Escambia County courthouse, Judge Burgosh gave me this little token coin here. This is apparently a tradition among law enforcement and military. Each of them will have this little token for the types of things that they'll do, and they'll pass it out to people who interact with them or who do something for them. So Judge Burgosh hands these out to everybody who comes and does an internship with them, or to people who really help his office. He himself has a massive collection on this little spinny small table, in a way. Probably got 50 or 60 of them. But this will be my first one. It reminds me in a way of the opportunities that we have, because each one is different, and at the end of our lives, each of us are going to have very different collections. So this is the first one that I get to put in mind. So keep your eyes open for what God has for you.
Always learning. That's a very admirable quality, even after 10 years of service in that field. many of you know who Rush Limbaugh was? He always joked about, yeah, I know you do. He always joked about Rush Limbaugh University or something like that. But his big thing was about life. He always said, you don't get a degree because the learning never stops. And that one always stuck with me. And then a cold case since 2001. Wow, that's as old as I am. I hope that one gets solved. At this moment, we're going to open up the floor to you all to ask questions. I'll start it off by asking, starting with Rihanna. Would you mind answering another one? Can you briefly describe just some day-to-day opportunities, or rather responsibilities?
So, my day-to-day responsibilities, it changed with what I was doing. The one day, they had a fair going on, so I was at the fair booth with one of the deputies. He was also the school resource officer. So, my responsibility that day was talking to people, saying hi to them if they needed help finding anything, just showing them where all the information was. With ride-alongs, my job was pretty easy. It was to follow exactly what I was told to do. If it was a call that was okay, I could get out with the officers and just shadow them and see how they handle situations. If it was a call they were unsure of, they just tell me to stay in the vehicle and wait and see what happens.
Jared, what were some day-to-day responsibilities for you? Just briefly.
Lots of reading reports, just like watching videos, taking notes. Other things, I got to do some filing. So when we went to magistrate court, of course, we have to go to the filing cabinets. There's a lot of filing cabinets, and you pull out all the files, and you got stacks and stacks and stacks for all the cases that you have to go through that day. And so you got to organize them and work for all that. So I did a lot of that. And then near the end, I actually got to do some of the electronic filing. So after the case is over with, you got your next hearing. So you got through and take that information, run it through the computer programs, so they can print it out and put it in the file, so they know when the next court date and all that's necessary for that. So I did got to do some of that. So that was nice.
Yeah, what were just a few day-to-day responsibilities for yourself?
So mine would change depending on what the office was doing that particular day. Like I said, I did a lot of research. We would have probably a business meeting Monday and Tuesday every week. And it would also change depending on what my attorney boss was doing that day. You know, was he going to a hearing? Did he want me to go deliver some papers to the courthouse or things like that? So it would change. He wanted to give me a very broad overview of what a local attorney does. So I got to dabble in a lot of different things.
Ben?
I mean, I was doing a shadowing, not an internship, so the only real responsibility I had was walking through the metal detector when I came in. And that changed too after they gave me a nice little pass. But some of the responsibilities that I kind of set for myself was to do some LSAT practice. So I spent a lot of my summer doing that. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I would usually go to courts. If I got off early, or if the judge didn't have anything for that particular day, I would pull up LSAC, Prep Plus, and take a practice LSAT or two. And I just took my LSAT about 2 weeks ago, and I think it really did work. Thank the Lord, the prep program did what it was supposed to. So kind of interspersing it, what we need to do in our future versus what we're looking at for further ahead in the future. We are still living in the here and now, and we still have a long way to go. So don't get so caught up in the future that you miss the present.
All right. Now the questions are coming to you all. Now the way this will work, they'll ask the question, and then whichever one of you wants to answer it, let me know. Questions? Yes?
Were you able to determine what field of law you wanted to study before you decided to do the internship, or did the internship heavily influence what field of law you guys are thinking about going into?
Okay, Ben?
The internship definitely helped. I learned a lot about areas of law I didn't know about before, things like family law. I can do family law, just too much drama. But criminal and civil law looked a lot more appealing after I after I took the internship. Getting to actually see the people interact with each other, it really was helpful. There's a lot of areas of law I haven't seen, but I would say that the internship was helpful in sorting through the ones that I did see.
Any of you other two want to take that question? Brianna?
So, going into the internship, I wanted to practice criminal law, and the internship definitely solidified that that's the area I want to practice.
Anybody else? Yes.
Did the internship like help you prepare for law school at all? And like if it did, how so?
Any of you want to take that question?
Since they've not been to law school, they don't know yet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was gonna say.
is there anything like you like learned from because obviously the people you shadowed or worked under have been to law school. Is there anything you learned from them that like helped you prepare for like different things you'll learn throughout law school?
No one remembers law school. No one cares. No one cares about the name on the degree. Nobody cares about what your LSAT was. I think the longer somebody has been an attorney or a judge, the less it matters. So I was talking to one of the judges, and he was talking about what law school's like, but he couldn't even remember what his LSAT score was. He says it really doesn't matter once you get past a certain point. So it's kind of a season of life. A lot of what we're focusing on now is to get us to law school, but I mean, we've say nothing ever really prepares you for law school. The one thing he did say was, Judge Bergosh said, get some real life experience. So he was a Marine for 20 years, got deployed over in the Middle East. So that's his real world experience. And he is more than willing to recruit for the Marines or the military in any way he likes. But another thing he recommended was the Peace Corps, which is a group that goes around and does various humanitarian projects for people. Says that that is looked on well, especially by the more liberal law schools.
What was that you said about it not mattering once you get to a certain point in your career? Could you say that again?
I mean, the LSAT is to get you to law school. Law school is to get you to practice. The bar exam is to get you familiar with the practice, and the practice is to get you further into practice. At some point, you know, you can't say that a 179 LSAT is really a predictor anymore of your success, because you have a record of your success to fall back on instead. So
It's not just law, but I hear that kind of thing in different professions. Dr. Reese, do you remember what your college GPA was?
I do, actually.
Oh, you do?
But the point is well made, and that is, these are steps in progression. Some people say, oh, if I don't get into a top 25 law school, I'm doomed. No, I mean, unless you're planning to do practice in a Fortune 500 in a certain area, that law school name is not nearly as important once you've landed your first legal gig. And I think that's what Benjamin's trying to communicate here as you move forward. Now, at this juncture, it's crucial. It's important that you have a good LSAT score, because that's gets you the most money at the best school possible. But once you've moved through that phase, there are other things. So this internship was not necessarily, hey, this is aimed at preparing you for law school, as much as this is what you could expect in a legal career. Is this what you want? And that's really what the purpose of this internship is about. Is this really the direction I want to go? If so, what particular area maybe? If not, it's better to learn that now than after 3 years of law school and $100,000 of debt.
Now, where I was going with that was, now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do your best in all that you do, but the judge said it doesn't really matter after a certain point. I don't think it really mattered that Dr. Reese didn't get, I'm sure you didn't achieve perfection on everything in college, right?
Far from it.
No. And he's been teaching here since 1985, and he's taught the likes of so many students. And I think that says something about academics versus real life. Anybody else? Yes.
What was a skill or a concept that you learned here in the classrooms that you applied or saw most in your internship?
Leo.
So I took business law here with Dr. Dawson. If any of you know who Dr. Dawson is, I'm sure you know what I mean when I say it's an interesting experience being in that class. But, so a lot of the concepts I learned in business law applied to my internship. For instance, I would hear terms and legal codes that I recognized from the business law class. So I was able to, I didn't have to like learn everything from scratch. I was able to understand a lot of what was going on just because I had taken the class and memorized for the tests. And because what I was dealing with was civil law, and the business law class deals with civil law, that helped too, because now, everything applied from the class to my internship. So it definitely helped. It gave, the class gave me a foundation to understand what I was doing in the internship.
Does anybody else have a question for them? Yes.
Are the internships paid, and if so, how well?
Brianna?
My internship was not paid. It was volunteer.
Jalen?
I was not paid.
Leo?
Not paid.
Ben? Nope. It's a common theme I hear among them.
However, I do know one guy who was not able to be here tonight and said he got paid for doing one with a law office. So, and he said it was not high compared to what other lawyers make, but he said it was very good pay for just a student.
Anyone else?
I would say those are rare exceptions to have the paid internship as an undergraduate student. You can get in with some of the Washington DC 501c3s where they will pay for internships and all, but for the most part, if you're going to be shadowing a lawyer or a judge or whatever, it's pro bono work. Your pay is the enrichment of your own life for law school there.
You raised his hand, Hayes?
After the internship, what have you seen that has motivated you to really continue on with your pre-law education?
I really like getting involved with some of those different legal doctrines. You know, you pull out the law book off the shelf and you have to turn to a certain page and find it in there. And then you have to build a case of that, taking some different details from a case, apply them to the law, and then write out something that basically puts the case together. And so I really like doing that, thinking through out the entire process. One I did actually kind of involved a little bit of civil law, because there'd been a guy who was taking money out of the bank account, and so they had to determine whether it was actually, he had access to the bank account or not, because somebody died and he was taking money out of it. So there were some different aspects you have to determine, who owns this bank account, and a whole bunch of different laws and rules applying to that. So I had to go and I did a lot of research, and I found all the details about what areas of the law apply to this, and basically kind of predict, okay, how would this whole thing land if it went through a court. And so I had to write out a whole lot report of that. So yeah, that kind of was like, wow, I really like that. I can continue doing that.
We should have time for one more.
Maybe we could comment on the academic side. Just what does a 3-credit-hour internship entail? You're not taking paper and pencil tests, presumably. You're not doing quizzes. So how does one obtain their grade in this internship? Benjamin was doing his own thing. So when you heard he was not responsible for anything, that's not our internship. The other 3 were responsible for certain things because I'm the instructor in that class. I just wanted you all to articulate what it was week to week and at the end of the course so folks have a better picture of what they could expect if they do choose this internship.
The other 3 also paid $900 to get 3 credits over the summer.
That's correct.
I didn't pay anything.
But you got no credits. 0 credits. All right, go ahead.
So for me, I had to submit daily reports to the sheriff's office, and then daily reports and weekly 10-hour reports. And then at the end of the internship, I did a paper that was, it was just like an overview of my personal experience, what I learned, what my classes helped me, what classes best helped me with the internship, and going forward, how I could apply what I learned.
Very good. So 12 10-hour reports, then a critique at the end. And does the supervisor weigh in at all on this?
Yes, so the supervisor sends in an evaluation of your internship at the end.
And all that's factored into your final grade? Great. And they all did a great job. I'll just say that as the instructor.
Did you have a question?
Yes, just curious, your guys' perspective, looking in on the professionals already in the field, what did their workload look like from your perspective, like hours they put in compared to the hours you put in? How did that make you look at the job for the future, like planning the time that you have to put into your career, that sort of thing?
Well, I was there, Monday, Friday, 8 to 5, and the secretaries, they were all there during that time. The deputy attorney, he was usually there, and Mr. Fitzgerald, being the main head state's attorney, he wasn't always in the office. He did some traveling. He had to go, talk to different people, do interviews with different things, and so he was there most of the time, but not there all the time. And when I looked at all the work that he was doing, it seemed pretty average. It wasn't too much because he had a lot of help. But when you look at the number of actual cases coming through and all the things that he was readily knowledgeable on numerous cases all at one time. And he had, whenever he went to court, we go through the stack. And the circuit court stack isn't as large as the magistrate court stack. But there's still numerous cases, and he could just boom, 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 go through, and he knew all about it. So you have to put in some work. But most people I've heard talk from in different big, huge law firms or whatever, hours are incredible, and it's just a very low. Small town state's attorney, it really wasn't overbearing. It's not good at it.
The judges at the two different districts had very different approaches based on their workload. Santa Rosa is more rural, fewer things happen there. Escambia is, well, we got crazy people in Escambia. So like I said, the injunctions load on Escambia is about 3 times the injunctions load on Santa Rosa. So, it differs even within a couple of miles. But I think it's pretty much standard across all fields that the legal profession is understaffed and underpaid, at least the government side of it. So they could always use more workers, they're always looking for more help, and especially for people who want to be there and who want to do well. There is no shortage of work to go around, only a shortage of time in which to do it.
All right. Now again, this internship does count as an elective if you want to take it. Once you have attained sophomore status, take business law, and you will be cleared to take HI 351 for your law internship. Again, it's 120 hours that you'll spend on the job. You will do, weekly logs you will do?
It's every 10 hours. That makes it simple. Someone can work 8 hours a day, or they can work 2 hours a day over a period of several weeks to submit, but you have to get all 120 hours in during the course of that 14
Summer
weeks.
or interterm.
Or
And
intern.
then at the end of it, you will have a critique date that will be done. And then a couple other things. Reed, you have that email list? As I give these last remarks, Bree will pass the email list around. If you want to add your email address to that, we will send you updates about future meetings or just information that we feel would be very helpful. We have an Instagram if you want to follow it, to keep up with us. Just search PCC, Pre-Law Society on Instagram. That's the username. November will be our next meeting. Dr. Douglas Dawson, who Leo mentioned, was a probate judge in the state of Michigan, Roscommon County, for 20 years. I visited the area when I helped at a teen camp. That was his jurisdiction. Spent 20 years on the bench there. Never overturned on appeal. That's quite remarkable. And then Dr. Reese has some information about another meeting coming up a lot closer this coming month. He's going to speak about that.
Thank you, Ryan. Just a quick minute, because I know your time is valuable. In addition to our pre-law society sessions that we have here every month of the semester that we don't have a legal connection, for the freshmen especially, we do have a legal connection, which is a little more formal affair. We'll bring in someone that's out in the field working in the legal area. We're really excited about the prospects for October 4. You want to mark your calendar, save the date. It's a Monday night, October 4. How many of you remember hearing about the case of the baker in Colorado that went to court? Okay. His lead attorney is going to be our speaker, Attorney Baylor. And he's with the Alliance Defending Freedom. This is a big fish to land here. And so we're wanting you to spread the word, because this is something that applies to every student here at this institution, in terms of freedom of religion and where those boundaries are drawn, in terms of if someone comes in and demands that you do something for them. If a pastor is asked to do a homosexual wedding, for example, or if an artist is asked to do a drawing for a same-sex union, where are those boundaries? And that court case set many precedents. There are more like that in the pipeline. And so Dr. Baylor is going to be the noted speaker. And we're going to move that to a bigger venue, so we have plenty of room. I think we'll be in Great Hall A and B. You will hear chapel announcements about that. We're going to promote that not as a legal connection. We want this to be a college-wide event, but you all are the first to hear about it. So congratulations for coming tonight. That's just one of the little perks along the way. Thank you.
Last remark before we conclude, those of you who have the mentorship signups for the registry, would you be so kind to set those on that blue table back there on your way out?